EDClass Limited. Breaking barriers to learning.
Hello and welcome back to EDClass's podcast. Today we are joined by CEO and co-founder of Solihull Alternative Provision Multi-Academy Trust, Stephen Steinhaus. Today we'll be discussing successfully reintegrating students and the power alternative provision can truly play in the education sector. Alright Stephen, so firstly thank you for joining me. Can you just tell a bit about yourself to the audience and what you do?
Hi. Thanks, Tom, and thanks for having me on. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of Solihull Alternative Provision Multi-Academy Trust, or SATMAT. We started as a free school, a single academy trust, a free school that opened in April 2018 with 31 students and about 15 staff all told, including part-timers. And we are now, and that was on 2/3 of a site, which is now our main site. We now have 6 sites with a 7th nearing completion in terms of refurbishment. We are made up of 3 academies, and we are working across not just Solihull, but now Coventry, and starting to make inroads into Warwickshire. So working with local authorities and mainstream partners and students from all across that sort of combined authority. And we originally started as what would now be considered Tier 3 AP places of sort of transition at key stage, in particular post-16. We were only year 9, 10, and 11. But as we've grown, our age range has moved, so we are 4 to 16, and probably nearing half of our students, if not more so, have already been permanently excluded, and we are working at repairing and reintegration with those students.
That's great, yeah. I mean, talk about all your experience coming from, obviously you spoke at our EDClass conference last year, which is amazing. Really good to hear you have your perspective on that. Just what are your ambitions then with the trust at the moment? What are you looking forward to, the next 5-10 years going forward in terms of AP and reintegration?
Well, 10 years, man, I better be retired. I better figure out some way to do this. The ambition is really, and this sounds ridiculous, but given our shared gym backgrounds, you'll know what I mean, is the ambition is optimization. And I don't just mean optimization of each of our provisions or each of our members of the team. I mean optimization of the options and opportunities for our students, first and foremost. But also the service that we provide and the systems that we work in. So that's probably a 5 to 10 year thing of where are the gaps, who are the cohorts and the kids, let's live in the space of who are the cohorts and the students that we can't help at the moment, but could, if we do X, Y, and Z. That should be driving our future growth. Now, along those lines, looking at it just from a student perspective, but not for a specific student or a specific cohort or a specific need that we see sort of cresting, you would say there is so much room for us to grow and learn from each other, but also to grow, let's say, sports provision. Vocational provision. There's so much need from our partners for that, but more importantly, so much benefit for our students that as we add incremental gains and marginal gains for both curriculum plus, and sort of enrichment opportunities across those, certainly the arts, performing arts, sport, and vocational, we can just grow and grow and grow, and add and expand. I mean, we run something like 39 different qualifications across the trust.
Wow.
It might be higher than that. I might be underselling. And that's just kind of the beginning, in terms of that fundamental belief. And EDClass knows that, because that's what you guys do, is that AP is curriculum intervention. And therefore, yes, we have grown in terms of bricks and mortar and geographical coverage and whatnot, but what the most important growth should be the enhancement and expansion and innovation from a curriculum aspect, and a teaching and learning aspect, and an adaptive aspect. So that's where I want us to continue to go, is innovation, best practice, learning from each other, working with more partners so that we can help more students.
That's amazing. Yeah, sounds what you guys doing over there is amazing. I'm originally from Worcestershire. I know Solihull quite a bit. So yeah, what you guys doing is really, really good. Having as
I
many
did not
options.
know you were a Worcestershire lad.
Yeah,
Whereabouts?
yeah. So I'm originally from Stourport, if you know where that
You?
is. Yeah,
Oh, cool.
yeah,
I've got, my wife used to play netball over that way.
yeah, yeah.
So I am actually, despite being an American immigrant, I know Stourport and I know Worcestershire very well.
Yeah, no, it's really, really nice to be fair. I like the mixture of
Yeah.
it's like countryside, bit, but it's nice and rural. But yeah, you're not far from Birmingham itself. But yeah, it's back on topic. Just say offering as many options as possible. What you guys are doing, and especially that we agree with that here at EdClass, just making sure
And
that
not randomized. This option has appeared because of this need, or
mm,
this cohort of need. And it might be that, we're looking at it and going, okay, well, maybe we don't need to offer biology as a single science GCSE this year because there isn't an uptake. Or actually, maybe we do need to offer French. We haven't needed to offer French, but there might be, a rationale for that. Now, that's kind of heavy-handed examples of a good idea, which is we are adapting and innovating to meet unmet needs for the students that we see coming through.
yeah, 100%. That's what we preach here at EdClass as well, having those personalised learning pathways.
Absolutely.
Make sure that that everything's suited towards that learner, and eventually they'll grow confidence, re-engagement, and then progress either back into mainstream or wherever their positive destination might be. So that's amazing. Just touching on lately, Ofsted and DFE have been talking a lot about special educational needs, SEND, how important that is. And, we all want to push for a change for that. How can AP actually support SEND, do you think? It could be quite difficult because they need a lot of support, but what do you think needs to be implemented for special educational needs?
First and foremost, the SEND estate nationally is, a lot of it is fit for purpose, but there is not enough capacity for the need that is coming through.
Mm.
And so, less than 7 years ago, when we were opening our first free school, there were so many phone calls, Tom, about, can we have a student with an EHCP? Can we be consulted because we're AP? Is that a child with an EHCP that has mainstream named or has specialist named? This, that, and the other thing. Are we allowed to? What section under this act and that act? And now, literally on our main site, I just spoke to the Senko, and there are more consultations for EHCPs in play at the moment for our main site than places that we have available.
Yeah.
So AP can provide some of that capacity for the SEND estate and can be the right destination for students with an EHCP, but shouldn't be in the role of, well, there isn't anywhere else to go, so they can either come to you, or there isn't anywhere for them to go, so they're going to stay with you. If a student's been permanently excluded and has special educational needs and that are not being met in their mainstream situation, and come to us, and we do that restorative work and that turnaround work, and then they can't move on because their EHCP isn't finalized, or they can't move on because there is no capacity in the SEND system. That's the absolute wrong reason for AP to have a student. So it's kind of, I talk about it all the time as the Kingsman bit, where you lock the door and nobody leaves the pub until there's an answer. And we're just starting to get some green shoots in the Solihull area of what if we said, okay, there might be some joint working between our trust, the local authority SEND team, the local authority inclusion team, at creating even more bespoke pathways. We know there are students who are being permanently excluded because of behavior and conduct arising because of learning needs. Why aren't we doing something more proactive with that, rather than just saying, oh, there's no spaces, X, Y, and Z? So trying to be on the front foot for these kids, because in some ways, and I mention this all the time, there's an ex-special school head who's now a union rep, who is a colleague and friend of mine, named Jane Davenport, who is I get this wrong because I'm an immigrant in your fair land. She's an OBE or an MBE.
Yeah. Right,
And we always used to have this little bit of a friendly banter that I would say students who are referred to AP are the most vulnerable students in the borough. And she'd always say some of the most vulnerable students, because I run a special school and they are similar levels of vulnerability. But let's combine the two. So students who've been permanently excluded and are on a waiting list, who should have or do have an EHCP, I think I can honestly say those kids are the most vulnerable kids in any system. And if we as a country, and if we as an education system aren't meeting their needs, then, forgive me for saying, then what are we doing? You know what I mean? So I think actually tying this question back to one of your earlier questions is, what are we trying to do in terms of the growth of this trust and optimization? That's one of the key cohorts, is what are we doing for those children on that EHCP continuum who are in danger of being permanently excluded or who have been permanently excluded, and how can we work at an increasing pace for them to make sure that they have the provision that they require rather than the provision that's left, if that makes sense.
No, yeah, I love that. I think, yeah, couldn't agree more in terms of, having connection is key, and making sure you're addressing the individual needs of each individual learner is crucial, because once you've got that detailed profile of what they need to do the HCP, you can
Yeah.
implement the best support possible. So what you guys are doing it's amazing. We do that quite a lot well with the review engagement team. It's what we do, constantly reviewing their progress, what else they need in terms of support. It's constantly improving and driving change for them.
Yeah.
In terms of, obviously, you touched on this in your speech with our conference. Obviously, behaviour is a massive thing as well, and SND students might anticipate having quite a lot of behavioural problems as well. But what do we do? What strategies would you suggest to improve behaviour overall in AP, and what can we do moving forward? Because obviously there's a lot of exclusion and suspension with AP. I don't know, it's a really massive question, but what do you think that needs to be implemented to improve the overall behaviour landscape?
It is a massive question, but in some instances, I would be seen just as a wind-up doll that keeps saying the same thing, is that need is changing. The profile of need is changing. What it means to be a child post-COVID in this country is different than it was 3 years or 5 years ago. And the system is not set up to cope with that level of need. The assertion I always make is that now what we would have seen as kind of standard AP behaviors, you're seeing more in mainstream. And actually in AP, you're seeing more, and I mean behavior both based on need and based on choice. I don't just mean randomly, but also some of the things that you would have seen in special and SCMH, you're seeing more in AP now, some of those manifestations. So again, there is potential if they actually get around the table with us, because it has been requested almost a term ago by, again, one of our commissioning local authorities saying, could you do a piece of work on it, what it means to make reasonable adjustments and how that can be inbuilt into a mainstream behavior policy that makes it very clear that reasonable adjustments doesn't mean a permissive approach to behavior. It doesn't mean an authoritarian approach to behavior either. It means an authoritative approach to behavior with a behavior curriculum and modeling of that and reasonable adjustments that are communicated in a way that everyone feels that they are invested in that rather than it's being done to or done for, if that makes sense. So again, it's learning from each other. Because and I did talk about this in the EDClass speech, was that alternative provision, yeah, it is a place. Yes, we are a trust that's made up of alternative providers, but done right, alternative provision is an idea. It is an approach. It is all-encompassing, and it is adaptive curriculum and behavior work. So if the sort of analogy I make, simile, metaphor, analogy, I'm an English teacher, I should know which one I'm talking about, is that if I am sat there and I'm teaching, I always talk like if I'm teaching maths, because I struggled with maths when I was a kid. I did do further maths, but I cheated. So,
All right.
And James and John, if you're out there, you know who you are and you know how I got through. But anyway, so there's a child in front of me and he's trying to figure out decimals. Now, if we think of that adaptively, if that child doesn't understand fractions and hasn't taught and mastered fractions, he's never going to understand decimals. Right?
Yeah.
So that's adaptive. That child has, a migraine. Child is not going to get what I'm trying to teach him. He's not physically well enough to engage with what I'm doing. If that child isn't regulated, that child is not going to be able to engage with what I'm doing either. Now, there is that crossover, is that in terms of antecedent behavior and consequence, I know I don't understand decimals. And I don't want to have to try and figure it out because it's hard, because I've had such a fractured experience of education, because I've been suspended so many times that I've missed so much, or this, that, and the other thing. So I know if I choose this behavior, not that I'm dysregulated, but if I choose this behavior, that antecedent is I don't know this work. Therefore, I'm going to choose to behave like this because I know what the consequence is. Consequence is I'll be sent out. And then the chase is on from a behavior standpoint, but what gets forgotten about? The decimals, the learning, what I was supposed to engage with in the first place. So actually, yeah, I might have a consequence, or I might have a behavior point taken away, or I might have a detention, which I probably won't go to. But more importantly than that, I've got what I wanted because I don't have a gauge with the fact that I don't understand fractions and therefore I don't understand decimals. It's that behavior that is driven by need, or that is fronting and masking need and masking those gaps. It just becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. And a child knows I can get this by doing that, and therefore I won't have to do this.
Again, yeah, I think it's going down to that finding what works best for them, isn't it? A lot of students now, these neurodivergent challenges become a lot more prominent as of late as well. And as you briefly touched on, internal AP has become really, really prevalent as well, and how effective that can be. I know in the SEND AP improvement plan, they having that triangulated approach with the local inclusion plans, making sure everyone's putting as many resources as possible in for these students. I think what you were saying, just make sure they've got as many possibilities as possible. To be honest,
yeah,
make sure,
and that has to start what I don't want to see, and we work with a lot of mainstream partners, not what I don't want to see. That sounds patronizing. What I'm loath to see is, right, okay, we've got an internal AP program. It's the old caretaker's house over there on our site. And if this student isn't towing the line, they're going there. That's different than we've set this up as an alternative curriculum, and this child is not having his or her needs met in our mainstream curriculum, and we've adapted it as much as we can. Therefore, the discussion starts with high quality wave one adaptive teaching rather than starts with the space or the room or whatever. It starts with, okay, I have adapted this in the construct, the artificial construct of 28 to 32 kids in this classroom. I am adapting that as best I can for all of them based on what I know of their needs and their skills and their ability level and everything else. And then I can adapt this to a certain extent, but this child is outside the realm of what is possible in that curriculum, so they need a different curriculum. That's when an internal AP really starts kicking, because it is a program and it may be a space, but everybody's thinking about it rather than I am the classroom teacher and that AP has nothing to do with me, or I am that classroom teacher and that sort of level of adaptation is for the internal AP, not for me. If I'm thinking that way first and foremost, then it's holding everybody accountable, including the child. Is this choice conduct that you're making, or is this behavior based on need that you are communicating? Let's go. And if we've got that clear, fluid through line from the second you walk into a mainstream classroom to when you are having intervention in internal AP, then again, like I talked about for our trust, what the mainstream school is doing is it's minimizing gaps. It's mitigating risks for students falling off and off of that continuum and out of meaningful engagement with education, whether that be self-selected or whether that be through suspension and exclusion.
No, I love that. I think what we just need to do is just remove the stigma for AP. I'm not sure if you listen to Shazad at the conference. He's set up his own internal AP.
Yeah.
And yeah, so having the whole team working in unison, so they're all on the same page, giving the best support possible to the student, and eventually, their re-engagement and they're getting better attainment scores because of it. So it can be massively beneficial in the long run, really, can't it? In terms of
it's that partnership. The work that he does is in partnership with what the mainstream or the main school is doing. It's not mutually exclusive. It's feeding each other in terms of best practice, in terms of information, in terms of curriculum, in terms of input, and in terms of staffing. It's not just one or the other. There is that fluidity with a lot of, when internal AP is done well, that fluidity of information, that fluidity of training and practice, and that ability for students to move back and forth as their needs dictate. And that's really, really exciting.
It is, yeah, it is very good, especially what he was telling me about it. I mean, it's massive for the attendance as well.
Absolutely.
He said that they managed to get, I think it's improve their statistics by like 50% or something. I can't remember exactly the stat he said, but yeah, he said it can dramatically increase that engagement. What would you suggest in terms of attendance, especially because obviously it's a massive topic too? How do you try and improve student attendance, engagement that way? Obviously, all the main things we talked about.
I think that there's a number of ways of doing it, and our trust works with Wayne and Inclusive Attendance, who also spoke at the conference. One of the many bald bearded men who spoke at the conference. But he doesn't have a beard, does he? Anyway, it is that work that and it's an area that we always list as a trust and academy improvement target, because, particularly now, but also particularly in AP, you talk about attendance, you talk about safeguarding, you talk about those things. What drives this is, if they are here, we can help. If they are here, they can help themselves, and if they are here, they're safe. And so that relational approach of it starts with, from the second that referral hits the proverbial email doorstep and interface of, this is now a name and a child who is in play, potentially coming to this trust. It's that building up of that reservoir of information about need, about goals, about dreams, about intentions and potential destinations. But it's building those relationships as well. Now, partially that is, we have that capacity in AP to have fewer students, so we know them better. To have fewer, I could say fewer rules, but I would say more so fewer microaggressions.
Yeah.
Is that I've shown up late for school, but you've shown up, as opposed to, I've shown up late for school. Why are you late? What are you doing? This, that, and the other thing. And now with the new attendance guidance, and we've had to close the registers, so you're going to be marked absent anyway or whatever, or you've shown up for school. Well, thank all the supreme powers of the universe that you're here. Let's go to work. And whether that going to work means regulation, whether that means jumping in a lesson, whether that means having a meal, whatever it is, it's given multiple reasons for every child for why it's worth them showing up. And it might be because of the relationships they built. It might be because their curriculum is more bespoke to where they want to get to. It might be because of the opportunities, both curricularly and extracurricularly, if that's a word. Yeah, I'm going to say it's a word. It might be because they know it's a safe space. For whatever reason that is, our ambition is to be ambitious for our students, so that the offer, even if it's a turnaround place for 12 weeks, there is a reason you are here. You are wanted, you are cared for, but you're going to be challenged. You're going to be pushed to be the best that you can be, whatever that might be. And therefore, we try to make it worth turning up for.
Yeah,
and again, with permanently excluded students, a lot of the issues that we have in terms of attendance is students who you don't get through the door in the first place.
Yeah.
Rather than take one, dip a little toe in the ocean and then go, ooh, I'm not going in there. It's more so, they're a name and a phone number, and you're chasing and chasing and chasing and trying to get them through the door.
Yeah, I think it's having that that small flexible provision that they want to come eventually to actually attend is ultimately build their confidence. What you were saying, instead of knocking them down, building them up, then eventually they're going to want to come even more and more and more.
Yeah, it's interesting because in our early days of the first free school, I remember having this conversation with one of our trustees, because in the old days, and even now, you could be forgiven for people who talk about AP as, oh yeah, that's all about behavior, isn't it? It's all about safeguarding. Oh, you've got the vulnerable kids, or you've got the tough kids, or whatever derivation they use. But actually, even as much, if not more so than mainstream, alternative provision is about teaching and learning. What is the diet that I'm getting when I arrive? And is it good enough to engage with? Is it good enough to behave for? Although that's a terrible phrase. But more importantly, is it good enough to turn up? Is it a diet that's going to feed me and feed some of the needs in a lot of cases that weren't met in my previous experience of education for whatever reason that is? And if it is, then I'm gonna turn up, and uh, actually, in every one of our sites, there are kids who take, 2 buses and things like that to make sure they're with us. Now, I got to be honest. When I was 14, if I had to travel more than about 15 minutes to school, man, no,
No chance.
that never would. And I say that to kids. I admire the heck out of that you have the guts. The only people in my neighborhood growing up in Chicago who traveled that far to school were kids who were like on scholarship for posh private schools or who were on athletic scholarships for posh private schools. And that was what they were getting for that.
There's
the
that
fact that
incentive there.
these are students who've had broken experience of education, a lot of them, not all of them, who are willing to put that in. Man, we got to celebrate that. Absolutely.
That's it, yeah. That's what we preach as well, celebrating the small wins. Even just logging on is a massive win for us.
Absolutely.
Especially since COVID, a lot of students have just fallen out of touch with mainstream education, and that's what we're seeing, more and more provisions coming into play. Just one or two more from me. Then just finally, what are your thoughts about the online alternative provision aspect, like what we are doing at EDClass? How beneficial do you think the online aspect can be in the future for students in the long term?
I think it's not a battle. The piece of work that is happening in terms of adapting practice in all schools has the potential to be game changing or piecemeal. And that is from a prospective teacher who is training all the way through to somebody who is nearing the end of their career. And what I would love for us as a collective of educators, and therefore the system in which we work, to embrace is that learning is learning. Not necessarily teaching is teaching. Learning is learning. And teaching is whatever is going to engender learning, whatever that might be. Curriculum is designed for learning. So how do we create a system? How do we create a curriculum? How do we create a school where, that does necessitate exploding some of the traditional forms and norms of what a classroom looks like, what pedagogy looks like, what teaching and learning looks like. But you can't argue with if a child is on EDClass and working on EDClass, or is working on Sparks or MyMaths or whatnot, and didn't know something 20 minutes ago and has got it and applying it and using it. Now, again, if we're working remotely and students are on a school roll, are they being acknowledged as present? Well, not according to the current guidance, but are they learning? If they are, isn't that the point? Isn't that what we got into this for in the first place? And, in some ways, the dream, particularly in some of our smaller settings, is you walk into a classroom and we've got one kid like you with the headset and the Janet Jackson microphone on it. And we've got one student who's building something and one student who's working with a TA and 3 students who are working with the teacher on this. And it's that individualized, but also, again, I run the risk of being just paying lip service to it. But with AI, certainly a lot of what I learned at school and what I was taught in terms of content, well, maybe not in terms of skills and theoretical applications, but in terms of content, a lot of that AI says, yep, here we go. Because if it didn't work, Wikipedia wouldn't exist.
No.
So it's a really exciting time to look at. Let's explode traditional notions of what teaching, learning, school, education means, and start with the common denominator of, is the child safe and learning and making progress? Good, do that. Whatever that is, and whatever is going to best engender that for the child, do that. Let's go. Now, I understand that's not necessarily living in the real world, but the more we can think like that and work like that, the more potential there is, particularly for kids. Some of the kids that we have, some of our kids who have that, who have unmet need, and for whom a traditional classroom is never going to work. Shouldn't be penalized for that.
No, exactly. I say, going back to what you said a bit earlier, saying how if they're safe and they're making progress, then they need to be rewarded for that, for their
Absolutely.
efforts. And that's what we're fighting for as well. I know there's a lot of guidance been changing as of late and everything, but we're fighting for that to ensure, the students are being rewarded for their efforts, but also schools are rewarded and praised for their collaborative efforts, to ensure they're implementing the best solution possible for them. So, yeah, definitely. But yeah, Stephen, that was all I had. Thank you so much for joining me. Really appreciate it.
No
Is there
problem.
anything, one last message you'd like to give out, to the audience out there of what we need to do to ensure, we're getting the best deal possible for these kids?
I think I am now more than ever convinced that the vast majority of us, regardless of whether we're in mainstream or special or primary or secondary or AP, or whether we're local authority commissioning, or whether we are a team that provides a service and provides a specialist offer, we are all doing the very best that we can within the constraints that our context has in place for us. And if we all thought like that, okay, we're just trying to do the best for the children in our care, we could learn a heck of a lot more from each other, rather than things sometimes getting bogged down between who's doing what, and my spreadsheet says this, but the child needs this kind of thing. So if we, in some parallel universe where we all were part of a collective, regardless of private or state or independent or special or age range or whatnot, if we started with the child and went, what is going to be, let's all work together to figure out what is the best package, diet, curriculum, pathway, and an opportunity for this child. What a wonderful world that would be. Because the vast majority of us working in education got in for one reason: let's help kids.
Definitely. No, yeah, having that collaborative approach, 100%, couldn't agree more. Where can people find a bit more information about you then, and what you do? I see you doing a lot more speaking slots, which is great and everything. So where can people get more info?
I'm at the Alternative Provision Conference for Westminster Insight in Newcastle. I've got about a 100-year journey on the train. On the 30th, I'm on LinkedIn, as is our trust, and our trust website is I think it's just satmat.org. That's got some information about the work that we are doing and the work that I and the central team are doing as well. I do need to give a shout out. We just had Ed Sheeran at Coventry Academy last week on Thursday, working with a few of our students, and we had a couple of our students perform for him. which is really exciting for Coventry Academy and Glenn and the team there and all the hard work they've been doing with Joe from the music service. So there's lots going on. There's a reasonable web presence for us. It shouldn't be too hard to find us if you want to come and see us or have any questions.
Amazing stuff, Steve. All right, everyone, make sure you go check out Stephen and his trust. Brilliant stuff. Thanks again, Stephen. Appreciate it.
Tom, cheers, man.
So thank you to Stephen for taking the time to discuss alternative provision with us. If you found this interesting and would like to learn about EDClass as a DFE accredited provider of online education for some of your students, contact us on 019 568 338 or email mail@edclass.com. You can also subscribe to our YouTube and Spotify accounts for more upcoming webinars and podcasts.
EDClass Limited. Breaking barriers to learning.